The world has become so desensitized to the ubiquitous abuse of power emanating from the White House that too often we're so saturated by scandals that we don't have the time to stop and focus on just how deep into this crisis we've actually fallen. So today, I want to take a moment just to talk about one of these issues. I want to talk about what's happening to James Comey right now, because this is bad, really bad. This is an existential crisis for US democracy, and I don't think enough people are taking this seriously enough. So let's unpack it.
Oh, and there's... He's become more famous than me.
Now, you might know who James Comey is today, this fierce Trump critic, but do you remember who he was? Because he was a federal prosecutor who spent most of his career as a registered Republican and built his reputation within Republican administrations, notably serving as Deputy Attorney General under George W. Bush. Although he was appointed FBI director by Barack Obama, his most controversial move was publicly criticising then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton for her use of a private email server, calling her extremely careless, but without laying any criminal charges. He then publicly reopened that case only 11 days out from the presidential election, when new emails were discovered that needed to be reviewed by the FBI. Now, many argued that this had a huge impact on the election in Donald Trump's favour, who would of course go on to win that election less than 2 weeks later. In January 2017, Trump learned that his new national security advisor, General Flynn, was being investigated by the FBI for undisclosed contacts with Russian officials that occurred before he was in government, including discussions about US sanctions with Russia's ambassador, and then lying to senior officials about those conversations. So in February 2017, Trump allegedly pulled Comey aside for a private meeting and told him, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy." Now, Trump denies saying this, of course, but Comey, like all good lawyers, immediately wrote a contemporaneous note down in his diary. So let's just stop for a moment, because even if the scandal stopped right there, that should have been an impeachable offence. Like, the US president leaning on the director of the FBI to drop an investigation into one of his allies. That should have been the end of this. What clearer a picture of abuse of power do you need? So Comey refused, of course, and then a month later, the FBI announced that it was investigating connections between Russia and the Trump campaign in the lead up to the 2016 election. Now, it's important to stress here that no matter how much Republicans try and spin this was not a baseless investigation. This was no witch hunt. There was something to investigate here. In addition to Trump's incoming national security advisor admitting to having secretly engaged directly with the Russian government and then lying about it, there is a long list of objectively concerning events that warrant further scrutiny. In June 2016, Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner met with Russian government representatives at Trump Tower after they promised to provide official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton. We have no idea what was discussed in that meeting, and it seems pretty reasonable that the FBI might want to find out. And that campaign manager, Paul Manafort, he previously worked as a campaign manager for the pro-Kremlin Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych, the guy that was forced to flee Kiev for Moscow after the Maidan Revolution in 2014. Manafort was later convicted of tax fraud for failing to disclose the tens of millions of dollars he had been receiving from oligarchs with ties to Russian intelligence. Trump, of course, later pardoned Manafort, but court documents showed that he'd even been sharing internal Trump campaign polling data with these oligarchs throughout the presidential campaign, likely so the Russians could better target their social media disinformation campaigns to help Trump win. The Mueller report ended up detailing dozens of contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russians or intermediaries, while every single US intelligence agency, and even the US Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, which was led by Republicans, determined that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump and harm Hillary Clinton. The only person who denies that this happened is Donald Trump.
People came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
Now, even if Trump is completely innocent and was totally unaware of what the Russians were up to, based on these facts alone, it's fairly reasonable to have an investigation to at least rule out that anyone within Trump's campaign was working with the Russians, with or without Trump's knowledge. Comey was the man that was in charge of that investigation when, according to him, Trump told him, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty."
Comey says the president invited him to dinner on January 27th. The two dined privately, and according to Comey, the president said, quote, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty," end quote. "I didn't move, speak, or change my facial expression in any way during the awkward silence that followed," according to Comey. "We simply looked at each other in silence." When asked about the loyalty question, the president denied it happened.
Did you ask that question?
No, I didn't. But I don't think it would be a bad question to ask.
Now, importantly, Comey testified to this before Congress under oath. And when it was put to him that potentially Donald Trump had recorded the conversation, James Comey famously said,
"Look, I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope there are tapes."
So with Comey refusing to pledge loyalty and refusing to publicly announce that Trump wasn't under investigation, Trump just fired him. And the absurd part is that the official reason for why he was fired was given as his mishandling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And if you think that is a lie, Trump himself confirmed it.
When I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
So let's just be clear of what Trump just said. He fired James Comey because he was investigating his ties to Russia. That's not just an abuse of power. That's obstruction of justice. Comey would then go on to testify about Trump before Congress, and he wrote a book where he compared Trump's leadership style to a mob boss and described the White House environment as loyalty-driven and ethically compromised. From that moment, he has been the target of political persecution. First off, Trump had Comey's security clearance revoked, which is a pretty rare move for a former director of the FBI. But then Trump began tweeting and making declarations at rallies that Comey should be prosecuted. Now, many dismissed this at the time as hyperbole, but the reality was that during his first term, Trump still had attorney generals that were career public servants, and they weren't afraid to say no to him. That all changed during Trump's second term, and in September last year, there was this remarkable post on Trump's Truth Social account where he shared something that was clearly meant to be a direct private message to his Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And in that message, he's demanding that she prosecute Comey and other political opponents. Now, just stop again and pause and think about this. The US president demanding that his Department of Justice charge his political opponents. That does not happen in a functioning democracy. It should not be happening in the USA. But if it does, the only thing preventing that democracy from devolving into authoritarianism is someone with the integrity to refuse that direction. Pam Bondi didn't. But the career prosecutor who was in charge of the case, a guy you've probably never heard of, Eric Siebert, I don't even know if I'm actually pronouncing his name correctly, he knew it was wrong. He refused to lay the charges, so was told point blank to either resign or be fired. Now, I have no idea who this guy is, but he gave up his career in an ultimately futile attempt to protect the rule of law in America, and that takes genuine courage, and I feel like more people should know his name. And he was replaced by Trump's personal lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, who had never prosecuted a criminal case in her life, but she was prepared to prosecute this one, which was enough to get her the job. Now, when Pam Bondi was eventually fired in April this year, it was the Washington Post and multiple other agencies reported that the reason for her firing was, and I'm quoting, her inability to effectively prosecute Trump's political adversaries. Now again, just think about this for a moment. The most dishonest, partisan, and sycophantic attorney general in US history wasn't able to satisfy Trump's insatiable demands for vengeance. So she was fired and replaced by Todd Blanche, who, shock horror, also used to be Trump's personal lawyer. And it was him who determined that posting this photo on Instagram was a genuine threat of violence against Trump. Now, I won't go into the absurdity of this case. If you're interested, Chaz Lucidello, who is actually a lawyer, does an incredible job of that on Planet America. But suffice to say, no one believes for a moment that a jury will convict Comey. It will almost certainly get thrown out of court by any reasonable or halfway fair judge. But Trump wanted Comey charged as an act of revenge. His liberty is curtailed until he clears his name in court in a process that he must fund and invest his time on. His character will be assassinated. His private affairs will be publicly scrutinized. He will suffer. His family will suffer. Republicans know this, but they're letting him do it. He's showing the whole country how he can use the power of the state to crush anyone who defies him, yet half the country are letting him do it because they dislike the person that it's happening to. Just think about who Trump is targeting here. He's going after anyone who investigates him or speaks publicly against him. When they announced a special counsel to investigate Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, Trump openly threatened him. He said to special counsel Jack Smith on social media in 2023, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." That's a threat to the federal prosecutor who has been tasked with investigating him. Now, sometimes we've fallen for so far and for so long, it's difficult to recognize where we even are anymore. But the US president is openly, unequivocally, and unapologetically using the extraordinary powers of the Justice Department to harass, intimidate, and attempt to imprison his political opponents. If that's not tyranny, what is? He's not hiding it. He's boasting about it, and not one Republican is attempting to stop him. And he's not stopping himself. Trump fired Comey because he refused to pledge loyalty to him and protect his allies. Why do you think Kash Patel is there right now? If Trump is prepared to fire any public servants that refuses his worst authoritarian inclinations, how long will it take until he has enough compliant loyalists in place to turn the US government into his personal fiefdom? Because it's happening right now. If the Democrats don't win both houses in November, the USA is genuinely in some serious trouble, because I don't know how many more James Comeys or Eric Sieberts there are left. And once you run out of those people that are willing to take a stand, no matter how much it costs them, your democracy is defenseless. And you will lose it.